So I was the first person there. This man who I've just evicted 4 days prior is bleeding out in the hallway.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 45 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
Hello and welcome to the show. How about that music? I want to thank Dave and Colin from the band Mustard Plug for letting us use their song, Mr. Smiley. I think it really sets the right tone for all of the exciting and fun interviews that we have lined up for you. So today we have our second episode, and our release pattern is designed to coincide with the RPOA annual conference, which is happening right here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, this Thursday through Sunday, February 25th through the 28th of 2016. So we are starting out on this Monday with 3 brand new episodes. And then a brand new episode will come out Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, leading right into the start of the conference. After that, you can expect a new episode every Monday, each one with an exciting and informative interview. Today, for our second episode, I sit down to talk with Emma Persons. Emma is a property manager with Qwest Property Management right here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Emma is also an expert in marketing and screening for good tenants, as well as managing your risk as a rental property owner. She has lots of great tips to share with us today, as well as some incredible stories of her experiences managing some unbelievably difficult properties. All right, well, Emma, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Why don't you just start by telling us, how did you get into property management, and why are you so passionate about it?
I kind of stumbled into property management a couple of months out of high school. I landed a job at a large apartment complex in Grand Rapids, just picking up trash, what we'd like to call increasing curb appeal at a property. Within a couple of months, I moved into the office and started doing leasing. And 2 months later, I landed the property management position at 18 years old for 165 units.
So you were 18.
I was.
And you were managing 165 units.
Yes, by myself for a broker in Chicago.
Wow.
And I got a free apartment.
So you got to live there for free?
I did. I lived on site, and I was there 8 years. So being very new, fresh, not knowing very much, the first thing the broker in Chicago did was have me join the RPOA. So I've been a member since '97, and RPOA kind of guided me. They did all of the tenant screening for me, which made me a lot happy. You know, I wasn't putting myself in front of fair housing. I was getting good residents. I helped take a really depressed property and turn it around. We increased vacancy. We increased occupancy. We had a better clientele. The whole property turned around over that 8-year period, and it really was through the RPOA.
Wow, so you were able to leverage the services that the RPOA offers to kind of help you do your job, and it seemed like help you learn your job at the same time.
Absolutely learned my job. So I took all the classes that were available. I used the front office, the attorney at hand with any questions that I had. I just called the RPOA for answers. So they pretty much helped me do my job.
Wow. Still, at 18 years old, it kind of blows my mind that a major company would say, Emma, we want you to manage a 165-unit apartment complex. What was it about you that made them say, we think Emma can do it?
I've always been able to get along with pretty much any kind of people in any kind of situation. And I find it easy to de-escalate difficult situations. So when you're in a low-income apartment complex and people are living right on top of each other, there's a lot of neighbor issues. But I have a great respect for the resident as well as the owner. So it was really easy for me to balance the needs of the owner, the broker, stay within budget by making the residents really happy. By making residents happy, they didn't have too many complaints, and everything kind of went smoothly.
So what does it take to make a resident happy? Now, you say this was low income. Was it Section 8 housing, or how?
No, it was market rate housing.
Market rate, but lower rent.
We definitely did have a lot of Section 8 at the property, but it was still lower rent. I think what it takes is just you have to be empathetic and listen and try to meet their needs and understand that housing is a basic need. It's shelter. And so when you're dealing with people in their housing, you can't see them as a number. You can't see them just as an income or a rent payment, but see that this is where they live. And so I I really did strive to make it a comfortable, safe neighborhood that people had pride in. And even starting out picking up the garbage, I knew that it took, when they drive in, what they see is what they get. And I think when I started cleaning the place up, and I physically did do the cleaning myself, the children even started to help doing it. The tenants had more pride in where they lived, and it was just like a ripple effect. And within 8 years, that became a really nice place to live. And I lived on site, so I had pride. When my family and my friends were coming over, I wanted to look nice, and I expressed that to the tenants. We had newsletters, we had meetings, parties at our office. I opened up my office to Boy Scouts. And that might be more than most landlords would do, but when you're in a multi-unit, large apartment complex, really is important to create a sense of community.
Absolutely. And it sounds like it started with just picking up the trash, creating a clean environment for people to really feel at home in. Yes,
it did. And, I always tell people if I ever get to write a property management book, and every property manager wants to write a book, the first chapter is take the trash out. And so the first thing, and this was really difficult at 18, Brian, I did have to get rid of a lot of tenants. So I had a good broker, I had a good owner that understood the long-term effects of property management, and that would be to sometimes make sacrifices to have a better product in the end. So we systematically move people out that were not living up to their part of the contract. So if they're allowed, they're not paying, they're not clean, causing issues that maybe cause cockroaches and mice infestation. We made those people move. I think my 4th month, we had 16 evictions on one Friday. I think that was a pivotal day. I think the entire community saw what happened if you did not follow this contract. These people aren't messing around. And even though I love my tenants, I'm really firm. And I know that I have to make the best choices for everybody, the greater good of the community. And so after that, what I always called a mass eviction, it just started getting better. So we started taking the trash out, and we brought better people in. It really was a really awesome thing to watch. Even the Grand Rapids police, they would come in, and they were just so thankful because the calls from our complex, they went down. Wow. The city code compliance, we worked really hard with the city of Grand Rapids and all the Section 8 workers to have a good reputation, and just working with those agencies it did make my job easier as well.
Yeah, so at the age of 18, not only did you take over management of 165 units, but it sounds like you took over management of a very troubled community where you probably, and having purchased or looking at purchasing some of these communities, I'm sure you were dealing with some crime, probably some drug usage or sales.
Yes.
And other security type issues. So yes. Talk about some, and feel free. I like stories. So sure. if you have any good war stories, feel free to share them.
I do.
Yeah, tell me what were in this 165 unit complex or community, what were some of the problems you were dealing with?
Well, one of the first things that I did, listen to the tenants, who were the bad tenants, start documenting the problems that we're having. So it's very easy to evict someone if they don't have a lease agreement. So if we had month-to-month people that were an issue, termination of tenancy. They can't fight it in court, the lease is up, we want the property back, we get a fresh start. So we took those first, people who were not paying rent, and they were not good tenants, those would go next. But then we had to really address the people who were causing issues for the neighbors. So that was a big fear of mine, is when I did get a good tenant, I didn't want them to move because the guy next door is playing his music at 2 a.m. in the morning, or they're fighting, or they're smoking drugs in the hallway, and they're common area hallways. So that was a big issue, is people smoking, partying all nights, honking the horns, having people coming over. So a good story, one that has, I think, got me my last 2 jobs in property management. I had a young man, constant problems. I instruct the neighbors, call the police department, I need police reports, so that when I do go to court, so I can win. So we had 4 police reports for noise, partying, doing drugs in the hallway. And so I proceeded, I went to trial, I did win. We evicted him. Sounds easy enough. He didn't return his mailbox key. And I should have changed the mailbox key that day. I changed the locks, but I put in the normal order for the mailman to come and change the key. So he returned to the property to get his mail, and he was shot. It's not funny.
He was shot on the property.
He was shot on the property. This story is in the Grand Rapids Press Archives.
Wow.
He was shot on the property in the leg. The bullet went through his right leg into his left, so he had 2 entrance wounds and 1 exit wound. And this is where you can tell that I'm really young and naive. I heard the gunshots. I called 911, and I ran to the hallway.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I was the first person there. This man who I've just evicted 4 days prior is bleeding out in the hallway. We were able to put tourniquets on his legs and stop him from bleeding.
You helped put tourniquets on his legs?
I put both the tourniquets on.
Oh, so my gosh. Wow. So not only do you manage apartments, but you save lives, too.
I learned a lot of lessons that day. One, don't let yourself get covered in blood. I was yelled at by paramedics and police department at that time, and taken right to the hospital, but I'm fine. And 2, change your locks immediately, not just your deadbolts, but if you have a common area, laundry room, if you have mailboxes, you don't want residents to come back who have left on bad terms. So I think that was a huge learning experience for me, as I am just a property manager, maybe not a first responder. So that's something that I've learned. I don't regret running there, because I think that time was, the police department showed up within 7-8 minutes. Felt like 7 or 8 hours.
But still, you put a tourniquet on, and it probably helped save his life.
We did. We were able to get.
Why was he shot?
Okay, this sounds made up, and I promise you it's true. He was actually wearing clothing that he had stolen out of the laundry room, and the resident recognized his outfit. That's what they say. So the
resident saw this other man wearing his clothes. Yes.
That's what they say.
And shot him.
Yes, some of the neighbors said it was drug related, but I have no proof. But the story in the courthouse was that he was that they engaged in an argument because he was wearing the outfit that he had stolen from the common area laundry room.
Wow. Okay.
And so this was not uncommon in this apartment complex. There was a lot of complaints about people are stealing out of my storage unit. They're stealing my clothes out of the dryer. So that was not uncommon. But yeah, the reason he was shot was apparently this is what the Grand Rapids Press quoted. He was wearing a stolen outfit out of the common area laundry room.
Okay, so at the end of the week, not only had you evicted this tenant, but you lost another tenant when they went off to jail.
He did. Yes, I did. Yeah, I did.
So you got rid of 2 tenants in 1 week.
I did. And you know what? They were terrible tenants. I'll never forget the 3rd floor corner apartment. They were bad tenants. So we were not sad to see them go. Wow.
So this is a dangerous community. I mean, you're not just taking over a troubled community. You're taking over a very dangerous community.
It was.
Any other war stories from that period?
There so many things happened. Some of the ones that we can laugh back at. I would walk the hallways. My husband at the time was a technician, a maintenance technician for a factory. And he he was my boyfriend at the time, but he was so nervous with my day-to-day interactions that he ended up working at the apartment complex, and he became the maintenance supervisor, just so he could be with me all day. And
just on his off time. He had a full-time job, but he would come and...
Well, no, he actually ended up leaving his full-time job, and he was young as well, and then he started doing maintenance. He was very mechanically inclined. So he started, and he's still in the industry today. So he ended up coming with me. And so that was like more of a tag team effort at that point, and we worked there together for the 8 years. And he was a maintenance supervisor, I was a property manager, and we were really diligent. We knew we were going to live there. I had planned to live there throughout college, so I wanted this to be a nice place. I had a family member live there, so we really were personally invested in making this a better community. So we would walk the hallways, we would walk the property, we would, 2 a.m. in the morning, we were getting complaints about a certain building, we'd walk it. And we'd kick those kids out. We'd call the police, and we'd start documenting the issues that we were having. Because I think it's really important to be involved if you are a landlord or property manager. You have to take some accountability in making it a better place. So we did. We used to walk the hallways, and we would see the tenants who didn't have power with the power cord out into the common area where the cleaners would vacuum, and we'd turn the breakers off and cut the cord. So we weeded out these problems slowly, but it took about 2 years before it felt like a safe place to live.
Yeah, a turnaround like that can take anywhere from a year to 3 years to really get rid of the trouble tenants and there's always good tenants who are there that are just wishing that the troubled tenants would go away. And when someone like you comes along to help make them go away, the good tenants come forward and start to say, thank you. You know, we really appreciate this community a lot more now.
And it creates loyalty. And even almost 20 years later, some of those tenants from that apartment complex have followed me no matter where I've went to work.
Because they know that it's going to be a safe,
they look
well
for
cared for place.
And I think that's true for all landlords. When you own a business, you want to create brand recognition and loyalty. And when you're a property manager or landlord, even a private landlord, if you take care of your tenants, they will always follow you. They will always have something good to say. They will always refer their family and their friends. And that free marketing, word of mouth, that's invaluable. So that I think I even teach that in the marketing and screening class. You have a network with your tenants. And to make them loyal to you is just, it's free. And you get the best residents because you know their values and their ethics, and if they're good payers, you never want to lose them. So if you have more than one property, and maybe they need something bigger, they'll come to you first. So I think it's funny. Even no matter where I've worked, I even going to Meijer, grocery shopping. I have a very recognizable voice. If I start talking, they're like, Emma! They'll come running over the aisle and they'll want to know where I work so they can come rent from me. And that's a good feeling.
Wow.
And that's rewarding. And I think that's a big part of why I'm still in property management. I did try at one time to leave to teach, and I did teach elementary school for 4 years because I thought, when you're a little girl, what do you want to be? You want to be a doctor, a teacher. That was my career of choice, but I came back to property management because I think providing housing is just as rewarding as providing an education. And I really do mean that. That sounds so cheesy. But I think that when you can hand over keys to a nice, safe place for a family to live, and they enjoy it, and it makes a profit for your client, that's a good feeling.
Right.
It is.
Well, and it's true that a safe home is a great foundation for a good education, because if children are not coming from a safe home or a clean environment, it makes it much harder to learn.
This is absolutely true, and I did teach in the inner city of Grand Rapids, and that was on count day. Teachers will go knock on the doors, and you could see that was a big concern.
On count day, you would go
I would
go around to where the students live.
Yes, to make sure that they're coming to school. They need the funding. So especially in the inner city, we would walk, and these are all walking districts. Which leads to another interesting story. When you own in Grand Rapids, in particular, snow removal is a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
So the city sidewalks need to be cleared. And so when I sit down with any tenant in Grand Rapids and they're responsible for snow removal, it usually starts with, I used to teach at Martin Luther King Jr. Academy. My children walk to school. Please shovel your sidewalk. And so that leads into another part of property management. It's also a teaching experience. When you sit down with your resident, you want to clearly set your expectations, let them know what you expect from them. And something like snow removal can become very expensive for a landlord if the tenant does not do it. You do not want to get hit with a city violation for $250 because your tenant didn't shovel the sidewalk. So putting in these little stories, whether it's teaching, whatever it is, making your tenants aware of why. So it's not me saying, you better shovel. It's saying these little children that don't own snow
It's not about you. It's not about the tenant. It's about the children. It's
not about the city violation. It's not about the money. I mean, it is about the money as well. You don't want unnecessary fines. You will never be successful as a landlord if you are burdened with fines. If you can avoid it, I go into the education, the lease signing. Do you know how to plunge a toilet? I have showed every tenant in the last 17 years how to plunge a toilet because I do not want that call at 2 a.m. that the toilet is overflowing. Can I charge the tenant? Yes, but it's not easy. It's more work. It can cause damage. So I think that when you're signing a lease agreement, that you have this 30 minutes. I tell everybody, you have 30 minutes to tell them everything you want. And it's really valuable to go over preventative maintenance. If you have a multi-unit, you want to talk about respect and how you want this to be the best community for them. And in order to do that, they have to be a great neighbor as well. So even though I left teaching, I feel like I still get to teach.
Well, you definitely are. It's interesting that you take the time to really train your new residents as to what's expected of them and what you almost demand from them in order to create the environment that you want to happen.
Yes. And I think that's fair. We have a lease agreement. It's for both parties. They have expectations for me as a property manager, and I absolutely have expectations back. So it's a good time to listen to them too and make sure that you can deliver what they are expecting. And if you can't, tell them. Bring it up, open communication. You really want to, I think, have a good, your communication, I think, is the key to a good relationship with anything in life. But with a resident and a property owner, landlord, whatever, you want to have open communication. So set it right then and there at the lease signing. I've never been a fan of, hey, just sign this and give the keys. No, let's talk. Let's make sure that, you're signing for at least a year. And if you do anything for a year, you really want to make sure you're on the same page.
Yeah, so year-long contract that you're
signing. It's a contract. And you don't want it to be a year, right, Brian? You want it to be a renewal.
Oh, yeah, the longer they stay and the happier they are, the happier you are.
Yep.
Turnover is a very expensive process, so the longer you can get your residents to stay, the better. We always say resident retention is the goal for any property manager. It's not beneficial for property owners to have a vacancy. So as a property owner, you do not want to turn that apartment, even if you think you can get $50 more a year or a month. You don't want them to move out. You don't want the 30-day vacancy. You don't want to repaint. You want to keep your resident there and paying with no vacancy, no prep cost. Yeah. Well, getting more specific, what are some of the things that you can instruct your resident on before they sign the lease or once they do sign the lease that do help save you time and money and problems during the terms of that lease?
Sure. I usually start with what's on everybody's mind is money. This is how you pay me. I don't take cash. I know some people do. I've never been a fan. But I say these are the forms of payment. So whether, property managers allow online payment, we would set it up right then and there. Money order, cashier's check, personal check, really set it. This is where you mail it. Sometimes it's a great idea to give them envelopes that are already made out with your address. I've done that in a lot of places where I'd give 12 envelopes with the move-in packet. So we're going to set payment standards, and I'm going to tell them this is what happens. Your rent's due between the 1st and the 5th. If on the 6th I don't have your rent, this is your late fee. I don't want to get rich off your late fee. So really encouraging them to get it in on time. And then do expect a non-payment of rent notice on the 6th. Even if they call.
So if you don't get their check
by
the 6th of the month, they're going to get a non-payment notice.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And even if they call and say, Emma, I'm paying on the 8th, and they've paid on time for 3 years, they're going to remember from my lease signing that, you know what, I treat everybody the same. Fair housing says treat everybody the same, and that's what we work to do. So you will get a non-payment of rent. Even if you have a $200 balance and your rent's $1,500, you're going to get that non-payment. So even if you call me, and I want you to call me, please call me, let me know what's going on, because I don't want to call you. Call me, let me know, but do expect this notice. And if you do pay on Friday the 9th, fantastic. You can disregard the notice. But that notice is coming. And I think that it's really important to be consistent.
Well, and not only that, but that notice helps you as the manager because it sets the process in motion. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't receive that rent payment by the 8th or the 9th, well, you've already begun the process.
Yes.
And there's no scrambling to catch up and wait another 6 days or whatever that period of time is. You've already begun it, and you can just continue forward with the eviction process.
Yeah, so exactly. And so we make that very clear. And, if I don't have your money by the 20th, I do have to file. I will never let a tenant get 2 months behind. I think letting tenants get behind in rent, it hurts everybody. It hurts them. They're not going to be able to catch up, and it absolutely hurts the bottom line for the property owner. So by the 20th, I'm going to file in court. I'm so sorry if there's any issues. I'll refer people to agencies that can help if they really are in need of help. But I try not to make exceptions. It doesn't go well. And fair housing. It's a protection for the landlord to make sure that they follow policies. It's a protection for the tenant to make sure that everyone's treated equally. So I just go, that's what we tell them. If I don't have it by the 20th, we are filing in court. And we will be filing for the following month's rent as well. And we don't make exceptions.
So, and just taking that process through to its end, if you do file on the 20th, what happens next? So
being a property manager, you have to use an attorney. We would request a court date for the following month. I don't want to get to court on the 25th of January and get a judgment for January's rent and then have February's rent due 6 days later. So I'm going to request a court date for the first week in February. This is good advice for any landlord. So I can get a January and February judgment. And so after I get my judgment, most courts will give you the tenant 10 days to pay. If they don't pay, order the writ of restitution on the 11th day, have it served. And I say pull the Band-Aid quickly. Don't delay evictions. It doesn't help anybody.
So the judge gives them 10 days to pay. Yes. On the 11th day, you go in and...
I'm calling the sheriff to order the writ of restitution. Then they will get an additional 24 hours from the day that is posted on the door. So the writ of restitution,
you go to the sheriff for that. They post that on the door, and it basically says, pay or you're going to be out in 24 hours.
Yes, and at this point, you don't even have to accept the payment if you do not want to as a landlord. Most landlord, if the only issue is non-payment, you're going to take that money. But if there are, if you have other issues, you're done.
You may not want to accept that money and just get them out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So 24 hours. And at that point, as a property manager, I'm calling whether it's the junk haulers or my maintenance technicians to be available for that eviction. So the court officer would come back, meet the maintenance people, the trash removal people, and physically evict people at that point. And I must be really clear that that's the last thing I want to do. My goal is never to evict anybody. And that brings up another topic, getting the right residents. Sometimes no matter how well you screen or how well you vet your applications, evictions can happen, but your ultimate goal is to not have those evictions. So you really want to do a really great job screening. The RPOA will do it for you if you don't have the capability or the time to do it. Property management companies do it for private landlords as well. So even if you self-manage, you don't necessarily have to pick your own tenant. You can pay someone else to do the vetting.
Right. Well, I think that's a good segue into talking about the course that you teach for the RPOA. Yes. You teach a course called Marketing and Screening for Good Tenants.
Yes.
Please talk about that.
Sure. We cover pretty much 3 topics, marketing, screening, and then fair housing. Fair housing plays into both the marketing and the screening process. So I give kind of a Fair Housing 101 crash course during the class. And we just talk about what that looks like while you're marketing. So we just let people know. Sometimes very inexperienced landlords will come in and they think, this is what I'm going to write an ad, I'm going to put it on Craigslist. Perfect for students without children. Whoa. Let's talk about protected classes. And we go through all the protected classes. Families are protected, so you can't exclude children. So we teach landlords what to say and what not to say. It's really important that you're very careful to follow these guidelines because fair housing, they do shop. They do look for people who are breaking the law, and they absolutely have the funding to do a full-blown investigation. And that, I think that as a landlord, that's the last thing you want to do is break a fair housing law. So it's a really 20-minute crash course on the do's and don'ts, who's protected and why. Even in Grand Rapids, income is protected. It's not protected in every city in Michigan, but it is protected in Grand Rapids. So depending on where you own in Michigan, you have to know city by city. And this is one of the big things about...
What does that mean, income is protected?
Income is protected. So if someone has verifiable income, you have to accept it. So my position, and the RPOA would support this, is that you would never in Grand Rapids say that you do not accept Section 8. Because you're discriminating against them based on their income. You don't have to take Section 8 in every city. It's not protected in every city in Michigan, but it is in Grand Rapids.
Oh, so in Grand Rapids, you cannot say we don't accept Section 8.
You cannot.
Residents. Even though so you can't even say we don't accept Section 8 payments. That would be the same thing.
We would advise you not to put that in writing.
Right. Okay.
So if you have a house that's $1,500 and it's a 3-bedroom, a Section 8 voucher is not going to pay that.
Right.
But you don't have to state in writing who you're going to weed out.
Because you do see properties that advertise that they do accept Section 8.
Yes.
So that maybe that's how you create that difference. You can accept Section 8 or just not say one way or the other.
Brian, that is perfect. And that's Fair Housing would agree with that. I take Fair Housing at least twice a year to stay up to date. And that is what the instructors there have said. You know, if you want to target people with Section 8, by all means, put it on there. And, you know, if you go to RentLinks, if you go to the RPOA website for marketing, there's a little box that says accept Section 8. And click it. And then that way it goes to MSHDA, it goes to DHS, it goes to Salvation Army, and the people with those vouchers, they'll find you. They'll find you quicker. And if that's the target housing that you're marketing towards, it's a great benefit. If you don't want it, you don't have to say it. There's a lot of things that we may not want as landlords. You do not have to state it. To be safe, you should not.
So don't say what you don't accept.
Right. Yes.
Because everything is protected in some way or another.
It is. So this is where we get into the marketing part is, you know, how do you market your properties? Let's really talk about what you have to offer people. Vacancy is at an all-time low in Grand Rapids, one of the lowest in the country. As a matter of fact, right now we have, in the last 6 months, had the lowest vacancy rates in the United States.
Our occupancy is above 98%.
It's amazing. So this is a great market to be a landlord. Higher rents, lower vacancy. So what are you going to do when you market? You're really going to talk about your property and what you have to offer. If you have just bought brand new stainless steel appliances, put it in there. If you have hardwood floors, put that in the ad. People are really searching for fenced-in yards, garages, extra storage, washer dryers. Hardwood floors is the #1 hit on Craigslist. So you're going to really take the things that you have and put it in the ad. You're going to talk about the number of bedrooms, maybe the square footage, the flooring type. If you have some brand new windows, furnaces, a brand new roof, people are really looking for green, small gas bills. So if you have anything that can show that you've gone green, that you can reduce their energy usage, you want to talk about that. Walkability, that's a huge new factor. There's even a walkability rental page right now that you only put your marketing rentals on this page if you're close to restaurants and bars. So Grand Rapids that's a big market.
And walkability, for those who don't know, is how close are you that people can walk to the restaurants, the bars, the entertainment. And there's a walkability score available, isn't there?
There is, and that's been really interesting for me to watch. I think it's one of the biggest changes in the market. When I started 20 years ago, it didn't even exist. What is walkability? The closest thing we had to walkability was close to transportation. So now it's changed a little bit from close to transportation to walkability. People want to walk to the farmer's market. They want to walk, you know, so Easttown is just booming right now. It's a huge rental, and the rents in Easttown have, I think, been up 20 to 30% in the last 12 months, which has been really interesting to watch.
Wow.
So the Easttown is, the houses are getting more expensive. The rent's a little bit higher, but people are willing to pay to have a restaurant right down the street.
And for those who may not be familiar with the Grand Rapids area, Easttown is a community that's just east of downtown Grand Rapids. Older homes, some multi-family properties, but you also have restaurants there and shopping as well. So it's one of those small neighborhood communities that really inspire walkability.
Yes, so that's a great marketing tool is walkability score. If you have a good one, brag about it. If you have a large basement with extra storage, that's what you talk about. So we talk about marketing. So those keyword factors you really want to put in there.
How do you find out what your walkability score is?
You can just Google walkability, put your address in to the website, and they will give it to you.
And Zillow has a walkability score.
Zillow
too,
does as well.
It?
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yep.
Okay.
So it's super easy on the internet. You can do anything. When you're advertising, if you use Craigslist, RentLinks, I think one of my biggest advice would be put pictures. People in general will not respond to an ad unless it has 5 photographs. 5 photographs.
So there's a magic number.
There's a magic number. So
5 photographs. What do we need a photo of? The outside?
Outside, kitchen and bathrooms are huge sellers. So, if, that people are really, even when buying homes, kitchen and bathrooms, people want to see what they look like. So outside, kitchen, bathroom. People are interested in the flooring. So if you can show what kind of flooring you have within the unit, anything special, if you have a built-in microwave, take a picture. Better yet, and it's going this way, take a video tour. Most of us have a smartphone. It takes 1 minute to do a panoramic video tour and upload it right onto the internet.
By the way, apartments.com offers a 3D tour. And we've done that with some of our apartments, and it is fantastic.
Yeah, and this is probably a little strange. It doesn't just attract better renters. It shows people who do not want your property. It might save you some showings. We don't want to live at the property showing it to 10 people that don't want it. So if you give them more pictures, more video, maybe they can decide right then and there, this is not for them.
Right, so it might actually lower the number of people who want to come look at the property, but those who do come are already familiar with it enough to know that it's in their ballpark.
Exactly. So saving you time and them. And, the market's so tight, you don't want to show it 20 times. If you can show it to 5 people who really want it, let's show it to 5 people who want it instead of 10, and 5 of them do not like the Michigan basement. So let's just eliminate the people who do not want it right now.
Right, because there's always going to be some deal killers.
Yes.
Maybe they want a garage. If there's no garage or covered parking, they don't want to live there.
Right.
But better that they know that up front and don't waste your time.
Right.
So in screening and marketing to tenants, let's talk about the difference between the free marketing that you can get from, say, Craigslist and other websites and the paid marketing. What's been your experience?
When I started, I think the first thing the broker showed me how to do was to purchase a Grand Rapids press ad. So we're not doing that anymore. So the marketing in general is free. If you're an RPOA member, they offer a fantastic site called myrental.com. And if you can send your pictures to the RPOA, they'll upload it and it'll hit like 60 websites, I believe. And I do go into that more at the marketing class.
So the RPOA offers a free portal, basically, that you can put your information up for rental availabilities, and it pushes it out to at least 60 sites?
Yes.
Wow, that's quite a bit. Does that include Craigslist?
It gives you a Craigslist helper, so you would have to upload it to Craigslist yourself. So what I find, and I do, where I've worked in the last 8 years, we've always tried to understand where people are coming from. At this time, people are still generally coming from Craigslist postings, and I think it's good to be prepared if that goes away. There's a lot of scams on Craigslist, so people are starting to become very weary. Even this week, I'm always scouring Craigslist for market surveys. I have owners call me, hey, how much is my rental worth? Even if they don't use me as a manager. So I always look through Craigslist. And I see this really nice 4-bedroom house on the northeast side of Grand Rapids for $700. Okay, that's not right. So I email the owner, or the Craigslist email, and 2 days later I get an email back. Hi, Emma, thank you for your inquiry. I'm sorry, I've been busy away. I'm in Zimbabwe. I'm a reverend. And he goes on, just send me this information, your social security number, and if you'd like to look at the home, I'm not available, but feel free to look through the windows. Okay. I think most of the listeners would know that this is not real, but this is really common. So tenants or prospective residents, they're talking about this, so they're starting to be nervous with the Craigslist postings. So that's one of the benefits of being with a property manager. We can show that we're a real company.
Right, you have a real presence. And
we have a real presence.
Following up on that story, first of all, it's unsuspecting potential tenants may send their social security number to a complete stranger. So number one, as a tenant, you never want to give out your social security number unless you know you're dealing with a reputable manager.
Yes.
But number two, I've heard that stories where that tenant will actually rent that house, send a down payment of a month's deposit, the first month's rent to pay for that and move into the house, not knowing that person doesn't even own it and has no right to lease it out. Have you seen this?
Unfortunately, yes. Even about 3 months ago, a client of mine had someone move into his house during the renovation process. Someone was on the property. We're not sure how they had the keys. I'm not sure if they broke in, changed the locks, but they absolutely moved this woman into their house gave her keys, a fake lease agreement. It was uncanny. She did have to move. It was terrible to have this young mom who gave her last dollar for deposit and rent to move into a house that was never supposed to be hers.
Wow.
So we do see it. This is one of the things, if prospective renters are listening, really do your homework and make sure, that this is the person that owns it. Go on to Access Kent or whatever the government website is that shows the home ownership. And I feel like we shouldn't have to do this, but in today's world, you do have to do a little bit of homework. Make sure that you're working with a landlord that is reputable, and even being a member of the RPOA that shows that they're educated, they're staying in tune. I think it's just really hard. It's hard for renters, and it's how terrible for an owner to go to their house and there's someone living there that they did not put in.
Yeah, well, as an owner, how do you prevent this kind of scam from happening at your own property?
With the second story, I'm not really sure how that could have been prevented. They weren't even marketing the house.
Wow, it was just a house under renovation, and some unscrupulous person said, I'm going to try to rent this out, see if I can get some money.
So, being the good owners that they were, they visited their property on a regular basis, and they were able to catch it a weekend versus, maybe letting it sit vacant and not visiting it for a month or two. So it could have been worse. So they did catch it really early. But as far as the Craigslist scam, I think if you have an ad on Craigslist, check your ad, make sure that it's not been stolen, because this ad on the northeast side, what they do is they take your pictures, your description, everything, and then they drop the price to make it a little, more interesting.
A little too good to be true.
And you know what? If it's too good to be true, it is too good to be true. But yeah, so they steal the ad almost word for word. So if you're a landlord, and property managers do this as well, be out there on Craigslist checking and flag it. So I've had many ads stolen, and when I see it stolen, I hit flag and I email everybody I know. Can you flag this out? Flag it, and we all take turns flagging that ad so it's pulled down. There's not much else that you can do other than market on other alternative websites. So, and
that scam, is it particular to Craigslist, or does it happen on other sites as well?
I have seen it on Zillow, not as frequently, but I have, and Trulia. But Craigslist seems to be the majority of the scams, and it's been in the headlines in Grand Rapids in particular, but I think it's all over the country. It's not just particular to the Michigan market. But yeah, majority is that we see it on Craigslist, but Zillow and Trulia I've seen twice this year. So that's scary, because these are really reputable websites. You think they are, and we trust them. So when people see this, they do trust it. So, definitely you want to be rentlinks.com. It's a free service. It pushes out to 40 other websites. But unfortunately, like I said, when I track these, most of my leads come from Craigslist.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Most of your leads come from Craigslist. However, there is a potential that you could get scammed off of Craigslist. Right. So that's a little dangerous. What about paid sites?
It's been so long since I've even used a paid site that I don't even know what I could say. Like, say, apartments.com or
you know what?
Site. Okay. Mm-hmm. And right now I work more in residential, single family, duplex.
And that's an important distinction, because if you're renting out single family duplexes, smaller multis, chances are you don't need paid advertising, right? Especially here in Grand Rapids. Right. I mean, I know that with my smaller properties, even up to my 37 unit, we don't pay for marketing. Right. It's all free sites. RentLinks pushes out the marketing. But once you get into the larger apartments, that's where you really need to have the marketing budget. And we'll pay, anywhere from $5,000 to $12,000 a year to get our apartment on apartments.com or forrent.com.
Absolutely. Those would be the two that I would recommend. And I'm not sure, when you're looking at the large multi-units, Brian, the RPOA is great, I think, for any kind of property owner. But the Property Management Association of Western Michigan, the PMA, they offer a great amount of insight and resources for the larger multi-units. And I've been a big part of that organization for a long time as well. For rent.com is a fantastic website. So yeah, absolutely. If you have 80 units in one place, it is time to up your game and get away from the free advertising.
Yeah. Let's continue talking about your marketing and screening for good tenants. Any other marketing tips before we move on to the screening portion?
I definitely have the place ready for show. I think that that's something that we underestimate.
What does that constitute? Having the place ready for show? Because I've had properties that have been shown sort of while they're being worked on. Maybe they're still dirty. There's some appliances might be missing because we haven't replaced them yet. How do you like to show your properties?
If it was up to me and it was a perfect world, I'd show them absolutely key turn ready. That's an ideal world, right? So that doesn't always happen.
Like you're ready for you to move in.
It's ready. You can
just sign the lease now, and you can move in.
You can eat off the kitchen floor. The baseboards are clean. Mm-hmm. So that's an ideal world. I do think that you get your best renters and the highest rent in that situation. That's not always possible. So I'm going to say if you're in the middle of renovating, you know what? People aren't turned off by a little bit of construction dust. They're not turned off by the missing refrigerator and stove that will be replaced. What they're turned off by is grease all over the walls, insects on the counter, trash in the apartment, a bad smell.
Insects don't sell well.
No, they don't. They really don't. I mean, if you've had an infestation and you've already
evidence. Mm-hmm.
Yes, if there's evidence, we're going to clean that up. I mean, I can't tell you how many apartments I've showed with my foot on a bug and been scared to move because you don't want people to see that. So, and I mean, I've rented. I don't want to walk in and see other people's filth or dirt. It's a turn off. If it smells bad, people might think that you can't get rid of that, or that this unit's for a certain type of person and it's below them. So I'd say if there's grease, scum, soap scum, dirt, clean that before you show it, if you can. But if you're renovating, people are more understanding. This goes to another part of the marketing. When do you market? So let's say you have a single family home that's $1,500 a month, Byron Center, nice suburban area, and those tenants keep that property in fantastic condition. I would hope that you have a stipulation in your lease that when they give 30 days notice, that you can put that on the market and you can start occupied showing. So if you have a great clean property that's going to show well, occupied, by all means do it. Start marketing. That's ideal as well. I think that's even better. I mean,
is that something you have to have the tenants agree to, or is it in the lease that you can start bringing people in that last 30 days before they move out?
That's too. The answer is it has to be in the lease, but you do need tenant cooperation. So even if you have it in the lease and the tenant is not going to cooperate, that's going to be very uncomfortable for the showing agent, the occupied tenant, as well as the prospective tenant. So this is something that we talk about during the lease signing. If you're planning to show that unit while it's occupied, they need to know and agree at the lease signing. And depending on the property, you're going to be showing that property to those people when it was occupied last time. So they're going to know the process. I think that's a really good practice. Large apartment complexes, if I had, the 165 units, that complex, I always had a show apartment.
You have a model unit.
Absolutely.
That looks great, always looks great, is furnished. And, the more furniture, the better the paint, the better the carpet, yes, the better your tenant's going to be.
Yep. And I always had a rule I've worked at 2 large apartment complexes, and, your model apartment's not your best apartment. It's a mid-grade. You don't want people to get in and see that, the model apartment's just, stainless steel, and then these appliances
brand new cabinets.
Right. Mm-hmm. So you don't want the best, but you want it to be clean. So that's something that when I worked multi-unit, the first thing I did was I went and checked the model. I don't want to show up and there's a leak. I don't want to show up and there's infestation of box elder bugs on the window. So you want to make sure it's ready. So that's another thing for the marketing. If you're showing yourself, you want to get there 5-10 minutes before the prospective person, so you can just freshen it up. Always carry Febreze. There's something about odor. If something smells bad to someone, they're not going to rent that place. And that's like time shown over and over and over again. People really want to live somewhere that's comfortable. So if you want to open the windows, have a little fresh air moving, just make it comfortable, have the heat on. I know we all want to save money in the winter, but if you're showing an apartment you don't want it to be 42 degrees. You want to maybe get the heat up a little bit. If it's in the summer, I'm not saying, have the AC running all summer, but you want it to be at least comfortable during that showing.
When people walk in, they need to feel good about it immediately.
Absolutely.
And we actually go through and spray the hallways to make sure that they smell nice, because that leaves a big impression as well.
Absolutely. I'm guilty of how much Febreze I've bought in my life. But yeah, just preparing that showing for them. Lighting is important. So a lot of living rooms in Michigan, they don't have a main light. So have a lamp for the showings. It's something I've always carried in my car, a floor lamp. So you want, don't have the power turned off. People want to try the gas stove. They want to turn the lights on. So all utilities should be on. I think that's a no-brainer, but I do see a lot of landlords, well, I'm going to save $8 this month. I don't do it.
Yeah. It's a marketing cost. Leave the utilities on.
Yep. And it's a pain. You do not want to have to go meet the gas company to get it back on, or have the breakers flipped off for Consumers Energy to get the electric back on. So you're going to save yourself more money in the long run, I think, just to have it on.
Yeah.
And damage. You don't want damage. We live in Michigan. There's no reason the gas should ever be off in Michigan. Ever. And those are horror stories I could tell on the property management end. You want to have your gas on and your electric.
Well, tell a horror story. I
well,
like
just,
those.
In Michigan, if you have a 60-day vacancy and, you think you're going to winterize the house to save some money in case it doesn't rent right away, you really are putting your property at risk. One, it's not going to show well. People are not going to they're going to walk in and out of your freezing house, but all the sediment that settles in the hot water tanks, or when you put the shower back on, it's blocked. I would say just the amount of damage it can cause. You really want to make sure that the heat works.
Yeah, better, and especially in the winter, you just keep that on all winter.
I mean, the horror stories, I don't want to take blame for any of them, but I absolutely seen 2 houses where the pipes have froze. And in some of the temperatures that we do get, the negative, teens, it might not be preventable in a house that's vacant. The pipes are just too close to the wall in the back of the house, or
in some of these older houses, the pipes are running on the exterior wall, and there's no insulation.
So that's when you learn to put the insulation in for next year.
You don't realize it till the damage happens. No. But I've definitely had that happen to me. We had a single family where the tenant moved out, and the house was vacant for maybe a couple of days, and one of our leasing agents went over there to show it or check on it, and there's a pipe that sprung a leak, and it was a hot water pipe. So that was just spraying everywhere, and the water damage was one thing, but the steam damage from the pipe was another thing. So that was just a terrible event and a horrible cost on top of that.
It is terrible, and that's landlording 101. Always have channel locks in your car so you can turn the water off at the main. That might be the best advice during this whole podcast.
Channel lock. That's a big stick with a little bolt shape in it that you just twist in the front yard. You find the shut off, and you can just shut it off from the front yard, huh? So
I've shut off a couple. I've shut off maybe 10 in my lifetime where I've had to shut off a bus water main.
Wow.
No. It's not. I'm not proud of that, but I'm ready if it ever happens.
Never good. Okay. But it does happen in extreme temperatures. Well, so I'm sure you have other marketing tips and techniques, but I don't want to give them all away because I think people should take your course. You've shared a lot of great ones with us already. But let's talk about screening. That's the other part of your class. Screening,
most important part of property management, in my opinion. Choosing the best tenants to minimize your risk. So I think the first thing I should start with, you should have a written policy, and you should follow it consistently.
A written policy regarding how you screen?
Yes. What do you require from a prospective renter to get approved at your home? So the RPOA does provide a paid tenant screening service where you can have them fill out an application, and they'll run the application. And you can set, minimal risk, medium, high risk, what you're willing to accept. And they'll approve or deny for you. They'll follow all the legal procedures with that as well. So if the person's denied, the RPOA will give them their adverse action letter so they can get a free credit report. They'll do it all for you so you're protected. So if you're going to do it yourself, you should have a screening policy. So during the class, I go over what that looks like, and that's pretty lengthy and it's pretty detailed. I'm just going to give some of the basics that I think that should throw a red flag. So if you're taking an application and the prospective renter starts with a really long story, you need to be ready. So we're going to hear a lot of stories. We're going to hear and these are usually really sad stories, and I'm such an empathetic person. At this point, I might cry. So you're going to hear about death of a loved one. You're going to hear about lost jobs. You're going to hear about divorce. These are all really sad circumstances, but I think it's really important for landlords, property owners to remember that this is a business. You are a business person, and you have to make choices that best serve your business. So that's, as a property manager, it's easy for me to do that because I'm working for someone.
So there's an emotional aspect to screening where you're, as an empathetic person, you're listening to these stories that can be quite sad.
They're really sad.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have to look out for your business because owning rental property is a business. It
is a business. And if you want to continue owning rental properties, you're going to choose the best tenants so that you have the best return. So we don't want to let emotion step in here. And this is why you want a written policy. Because if you have a written policy, you're going to give that to your prospective resident. And if they don't qualify, you're going to say, this is the reason you're not approved. Give them their denial letter, adverse action letter, which is required by law. And I'm surprised at how many people do not know that they have to give this letter. So you have to have.
So you're saying if someone applies to live in your apartment or your rental property, and you turn them down, you have to give them a letter that basically says why?
Yes, it's Michigan state law. It's called an adverse action letter, AAL, denial letter, and it really should state the reason they're denied. So 4 reasons that generally people deny: credit, rental history, lack of income, or criminal history. Those are, or maybe pet, maybe a 5th one is a pet. So you have these 4 areas. So if you're denying them because they do not make enough income, simple letter. You do not meet the income requirements. If you're denying them because of their credit, you have to give them the adverse action letter plus 2 other sheets of paper, which I do provide in this class. One will come from the credit bureau that you're using, and it's going to explain to them what on their credit report made them not get approved, and it's also going to give them the ability to get a free credit report. So this is a federal law as well. You have got to give this letter. So you really want to make sure that you're prepared for that. And I think that's where, if you're a private landlord, this is one of the trickiest areas, and it's the most regulated. Using the RPOA service or a property management placement service might protect you and give you less of a headache. This makes it a little bit easier. So those 4 areas I'll discuss. Criminal history. If you decide to have a criminal history, as a landlord, you can do that. Criminal history is not protected. It's not a protected class yet. We could see that change. So right now, if you do not want any felonies, you can just state, I do not want any felons. Some very large apartment complexes choose not to rent to anyone with misdemeanors. Considering 1/3 of the country has had one,
wow,
you might be putting out a large market. So it's totally up to you. You can do whatever you want. So these are things that are not protected. But I'd be really clear. So if you say you're not accepting a felony and someone comes in, well, it was 7 years ago, but I'm a really good renter, I have great credit, I have the income, and you make an exception for them, you are breaking fair housing. So we really want to be consistent every single time. So have your policy. My personal preference would be that if someone has good rental, good credit, and good income, they're probably a low risk. And if they did have a felony 10 years ago, but have been able to live a really great life in the last 10 years when they've showed responsibility, I'm going to say they're a really good risk because they've learned a lesson. So that, and they're not making those mistakes. Now, if somebody has 3 felonies, so you can make that specific. You could say no more than 1 felony 5 years ago. So that's your criminal. Income, there's a lot of debate here. I would say they have to make at least 3 times the rent. That's pretty standard.
Yeah, so their income from their job, or from whatever Section 8 money they're getting. Well, wait, correct me here, but it's basically their income that they receive each month needs to be 3 times what their rent is.
Yes, at minimum. So Section 8 is a little trickier. So Section 8, what they do is they income qualify their people themselves, and their goal is to make sure that they can afford the housing. So if you do decide to accept Section 8, you have a 3-bedroom in Grand Rapids for $700 a month. That voucher will determine if they can afford your house and your utilities. I don't always get agreed here, so I'm not speaking for the RPOA. I'm speaking from my personal experience. I have found a lot of Section 8 tenants to be fantastic, and in the housing that I've worked in, we've needed those vouchers to keep occupancy rates high, to keep income coming. So if someone has a great rental, great credit, and they have a good Section 8 voucher that qualifies for my property, I'm absolutely going to jump on that and take it. So the income qualification, you're making exceptions, but Fair Housing is okay with it because you're using a government voucher. So you're making exceptions for people because Section 8 is saying that they will cover that rent.
Okay. Let's talk about some of the stories that you've heard, because you mentioned how you hear a lot of stories from tenants, and you know, those stories are a lot of times very persuasive to get you to maybe lower your standards or change your standards. Give me an idea or a sense of, you know, whether you've done it in your past or you've seen other people do it, where those standards have been lowered to accept someone who has a really good story and maybe telling the truth, what the outcome has been. Sure.
So as a property manager, we get most of our clients when they're in distress. So a landlord will come to me and say, you know what, this is just getting hard. I just take my portfolio over because they're not doing well.
Right. So this is the owner of the property comes to you and says, I need to hire a professional manager.
Yes. So this is, they don't usually do it because things are going great.
Right.
So usually they'll come and, we'll take over a portfolio, maybe 1, 10, 20 houses at a time. And we inherit these residents. And I'll start looking through the delinquency, and you start seeing the delinquency. And this is a true story. I had one house where they were month to month. They were already 2 months behind when I took over. So my first thing, send the 7-day notice of non-payment, serve them. I don't hear anything back. So I get my court date, but now we're in the 3rd month of owing money. I get the judgment. They never show. They're already gone. Even though I've knocked on the door, I still have to go through this process of getting a judgment to take possession back of the property. So I get my writ, I get my court sheriff, get my maintenance guys, we go unlock the door. Lo and behold, they've been gone for 4 or 5 months. We're not really sure when they're gone, but this house is completely trashed. I mean, the fridge is gone. I think that the full damage was about $20,000 worth of damage. Wow, so
they had taken the appliances with them.
They did. They took some appliances, but there was holes in the walls. There was like murals and paintings on the wooden doors. Some of the cabinet doors were ripped off. None of the plumbing worked. They had blocked all the drains. The fireplaces, the ash was coming out of the living room fire to about a 4-foot radius out of the fireplace. So they had just been, I don't think the gas was turned off.
So they actually went into the fireplace and pulled the ashes out.
Well, I think, and this is a guess, the gas had been turned off, so they were using it as their heat source, but they never cleaned it out. So they're burning paper and logs and junk and magazines. You could see furniture, everything, but they would never clean it out. So the ash was just moving and moving. It could have caused a fire.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, at that case, it might have been better. I don't know. But it was terrible. And I actually used one of the pictures from that walkthrough during my class. The mice were so bad because of the amount of garbage. They didn't even move, Brian. I'm not kidding. I'm standing there taking my pictures, and the mice are at my feet looking at me, waiting. The place was so infested. They just lived there. And it was one of the, I'm shuddering. It was one of the worst walkthroughs I've ever done. So after that, I do my walkthrough. I try to get everything cleaned out as quick as possible, start the pest control treatment. So you get it moving. There's a huge loss, but it happens. Let's just move on. Get the cleaning, get everything.
Right, do what has to be done.
Just get it done.
get this cleaned up and rent it out again.
Yeah, so that's the goal, right? So you just go in, put your blinders on, take your damage report, get out. So I get back to the office. I run the tenant's name. I just go to the RPOA rental history website, the tenant history website. It's a free service. So this, I really, if you're a rental property owner in Western Michigan, you can log in And landlords have shared bad experiences with different tenants.
All right. So that this type of situation doesn't happen to someone else.
Right. And her name is in the system, the RPOA system. So I go to the 61st District Court, which is Grand Rapids Court, public records. I put in her name. This is not her first time being evicted. So yeah, I see my landlord-tenant judgment from last month on there. But then 2 years ago, I see another one. 2 years before that, I see another one. 2 years before that, this woman has been habitually evicted every 2 years for the last 10 years.
Wow.
How did she get this house? So I talked to the owner, and my goal is never to make an owner feel like they did something wrong. And I said, did you even run a credit check? Did you do any background? Nope. She had a job. She showed me a paycheck stub. She was super nice. Never called a landlord. Never pulled a credit report. Never even used the free websites like a court record to see if this person was a risk. She had a great story. She had a job. It was good enough.
Were there any warning flags? Obviously, they should have done the proper screening, but were there any warning flags that were presented without the screening?
He said no, and I believe him. Mm-hmm. And this is someone that owns a lot of property, and I think that at that point, between working a full-time career and having a family and trying to juggle 20 rentals, you just sometimes just let them fall between the cracks.
Sometimes you cut corners and you don't do the proper screening, and this is what happens.
And you see a driver's license and a great paycheck. They have money. They drive a nice car. They're clean, well-spoken. This is perfect. So we can't skimp out. So that's where we really get into the screening, is that do it consistently. Check the free websites. Follow your standards. Landlord, tenant is my biggest thing. If they owe another landlord, I don't care what the story is. I don't care how good their job is. I don't even care if they have a 750 credit score. If someone owes a landlord, do not give them housing. I have an exception. If they're willing to pay that landlord, and you can get a receipt and a phone call from the landlord, people mess up, right? So if you have someone, they apply, they have pretty good credit, they've been at their job 4 years, but you see this landlord-tenant judgment from 7 years ago. And this is a story I always get. I had a roommate, it was in college, and, I moved out. She said I could move out, but then she didn't pay her part. So now it's on my credit. Well, you know what? You signed a lease agreement with that landlord. This is your responsibility. So I'm a big advocate for getting other landlords paid. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it work so many times. I can't tell you how many thank yous I've received as a property manager. I never thought I'd get that money, and I get a call and they're so happy, even if it's $800. I mean, it goes a long way.
Sure.
So take the time, make them pay it off. So you don't have to necessarily have, you might want to have a policy, no evictions ever, but we did have the economy crashed in 2008. A lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people lost their housing. So we don't necessarily have to say you can never have had an eviction, but if they have the good credit, the good job, take them if they're willing to pay. But make that clear in your policy. So that's your landlord-tenant history. If I talk to a previous landlord and that person was habitually late, trashed the unit, and was a terrible neighbor, I'm gonna wait for someone else. I'm gonna deny this person on rental history, and I'm gonna wait for someone better. Mm-hmm. I don't have to deal with that headache. They've had their turn. It's time to find someone else. And then, so next is credit, and this is a hard one, but I do think it's important that people pay their utilities on time. This is Michigan. If you're going to rent out a 120-year-old house to someone that cannot pay a gas bill on time, you're opening yourself up to frozen pipes. So if you DTE credit reports, so you run the credit report and they're not good gas bill payers, or they owe DTE or owe Consumers Energy, this might be a good time to deny them. So, good utility payers with good credit history, maybe even if it's not great credit, they just don't owe the key players, the landlords, the utilities, judgments. If you see State of Michigan on there and they have a judgment, they could go to jail. You might want to avoid that. So I avoid the people who are looking to, if they owe front of the court $20,000 and they're not paying, they will get picked up. Then they're not going to have a paycheck. So these are, things to look for.
Yeah. So if you want to look into the future and know what your tenant's going to do in the future, look at what they've done in the past.
Yeah.
And that will give you a good indication.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking for quite a while, so I'm gonna wrap it up. But before I do, I have one last question for you, and it goes back to the first thing you talked about when you were 18 years old. You took over a quite dangerous property. I mean, most people would be very scared and probably would have quit that job within a week. So what was it about you that made you say, you know what, not only am I going to stick this out, but I know I can change this and make it better?
This is so cheesy. There was a woman who had lived in that complex since 1979. She was one of the first people to move in. And when I met her, she came down and she cried in my office. Oh, Brian, I'm going to cry. She did. She goes, I've lived here so long, and her husband had recently passed away from cancer. And she's like, I just want it to be better. I don't want to move. She didn't want to move. This lady was she's not moving. So I felt responsible for her quality of life. I'm literally in charge of her happiness at this point. And that's what she told me is, so when I'm moving someone next to her, Mrs. Sherwood, she was so amazing, but I was able to provide a good quality place for her to live. And I'd done that while she was still alive. And the cookies, oh my gosh, this woman could really make the best cookies in the world. But I think that was really rewarding. And just even for the property owner, the broker in Chicago, he used to come up once a week. By the time I finished 8 years later, I'd see him once every 6 months, twice a year, for the Christmas party and the summer barbecue. So that was a really rewarding. I'm a really driven person anyway, but it was really rewarding to understand budgets, how to keep them, and the other side of it was the tenants. I really like people, and I think good property managers have to like people, and I do. And so that in itself, the cookies, the happy tenants, like seeing it clean up, it was fun. I liked it. I still like it. Here I am, still liking it.
Still doing it, yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all your stories and your experience with us. And I can't encourage people enough who live in the Grand Rapids area or even in Michigan who are thinking of owning rental property or do own their own rental property, but really need to understand the marketing and the screening part a lot better. I can't encourage them enough to take your course and learn even more beyond what you've shared with us today. So thank you so much, Emma, for talking with us.
Thank you, Brian. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.